Okay, you all good? Let's do it. Hello and welcome to the B2C Lead Generation Podcast. You're listening to the B2C Lead Gen Podcast. My name is Daniel Hopewell here with Simon Delaney, and this is episode 75, The Dirty Secrets of Ad Fraud. And if you think that's a catchy title, it's because we've pinched it from our guest today. Rich Khan from Anura is back with us on the show. Rich, how's it going?
Great. Thanks for having me today.
Thank you for coming back. It's been a few months since I guess a few months now. How long has Lead Gen? Well, that's 4 months ago. It seems like a long time ago, actually.
Yeah.
Right. Since we saw you, but we did a little cameo on the podcast, a little 10-minute one we did. There's mini pods there, and we said at the time, let's get you back and do a full one. So, firstly, thank you for joining us and checking in with us and to do a full one. We appreciate it. And yeah, like we said with the title, the dirty secrets of ad fraud. Let's get cracking. Rich, tell us your dirty secrets, ad fraud or otherwise.
There's, when you talk about the dirty secret, we actually wrote a 3-part series on the whole process because there is a lot of stuff going on, and it's really like, it's called the dirty secrets of ad fraud, but it's really the dirty secrets of ad fraud detection. Because what's happening is our space is a very profitable space, right? It's a SaaS solution. SaaS is by nature generally profitable. But what's happening is you have a lot of companies popping out of the woodworks to try to get in on the game, and they'll do anything to get a client to use their product. So they'll produce products, they'll lie about what their product can do, they'll lie about certification processes, just to get the client on. They're doing a job to try to sell a product, and they start off with a very basic product that they quickly put together, and then they start trying to develop it while they're selling it at the same time. So for example, one of the ones that I pick up a lot of is we've seen companies lying about their certification process. So in our space, we're an extension of cybersecurity. So when you're dealing with a company that's going to, like, for instance, I walk into a company, you're going to use my software to direct millions of dollars a month or hundreds of thousands of dollars a month of marketing dollars. What should you be buying and what you shouldn't be buying? So you shouldn't just trust anybody to do that. You want to make sure that they're have some level of standards. So 2 companies came out to do certification processes, the MRC, which everybody's heard of, right? And TAG. TAG is one of the newer organizations, but they're international. So since we have a lot of international companies, we like their process, and we went to them for certification. And it's funny, the 2 companies use the same document for certification. The MRC wrote the document, they both use the same document for the certification process. If I remember correctly, it's like an 87-page report, and it takes a third-party auditor and a dedicated staff member on my team 3 months to get through the certification process. Wow. Where we have to show code, database stuff, processes, documented stuff. Like, they look under our skirt and see everything that we do. So we have to trust these auditors not to disclose our information to our competitors, obviously. But when it's all said and done, after 3-month review, if you pass the test, then you get certified for running an ad fraud solution, doing best practices for that year. Now, every year it changes. We've caught not just one, but probably 2 to 3 companies already running around saying that they're either MRC accredited or TAG certified. And then you go to the site, which you can search, and their names aren't there. I search it every time the certification process comes out. I check it because I want to know how many of us are there. And there's probably 50 to 100 companies in the marketplace that claim that they do some type of ad fraud detection, but there's only 8 of us that are actually certified to do it.
Wow.
So whenever I talk to a client, I say, certification is important because at least somebody looked at our code, we're following best practices, we're doing what's supposed to be done to solve fraud. Now, of the 8 of us, we all have our own angle of how we handle it and our own niche in the market of what we focus on. Out of the certified vendors, we're the only ones that focus on the performance-based marketing sector, like lead gen, e-commerce, things like that. But that's our niche, right? But at least that we follow some level of standards, and some third parties actually looked at it. But we got people running around lying about that, or they'll lie about, the experience that they have in the space. I've seen that where you go straight to the owner's LinkedIn profile and it doesn't match up to what they're selling to their clients. Things like that. I probably have one of the longest histories in the internet when it comes to most people that are still actually actively working on the internet. I started my first business in '93. So that puts me at 29 years next year.
Online business.
Digital marketing company in 1993. Now, remember, 1994 is when the web browser came.
I was going to say, I'd have loved to have seen your website then.
There was none.
Yeah.
It was an email marketing company. In fact, what I was doing was I was hooked. I mean, I've been a developer since age 9. I wrote my first game at age 9, got published in Compute Gazette when I was 12. I've been a programmer since as long as I can remember. And when the internet came out where computers can talk to other computers and not have to dial the phone number to do it, I was hooked. So I started writing a blog, or I'll call it a newsletter, really, is what it was, about the ever-changing internet as it was coming about. And I would hang out in AOL at the time. Back then, they had the chat lines you can jump into, and I would tell people I'm writing articles. Anybody want to join, want to subscribe to my article? And I had over 20,000 opt-ins back in the early 90s. So that was my first, and then people asked to advertise in my newsletter, and I said sure, and that became my first marketing enterprise in the space. But I've been doing this all along, and fraud has constantly been in the picture every single step of the way, because wherever you're trying to do something right, somebody's trying to do it wrong, right? So these little dirty secrets that pop up, I've been seeing over the last 3 decades in my history on the internet, constantly showing themselves. So I've been dealing with it all this time. So we finally got an opportunity inside of with this company, which has been around 5 years, to help people fight fraud when it comes to visitor fraud. Is really what we focus on. We call ourselves an ad fraud solution because that's where it makes a lot of sense. You spend a lot of money on advertising. On average, anywhere from 25 to 35% of that, depending on channels, is going to be fraudulent. And then identifying where it's coming from so you can minimize where you're buying the fraudulent traffic, focus on the good stuff, see a big ROI increase. Sorry, I talk fast. I'm originally from New York.
It's fine for us. It's perfect. It's perfect speed, great cadence.
Awesome.
It's interesting. So what's funny is almost like the guys that are committed to carrying out the fraud are in their own like micro way carrying out a fraud about carrying out the fraud, carrying out the protection against the fraud. It's that the thing. I guess the funny thing from their side is they may as well just either own it and say like we're going to be tag certified or MRC, or just not even mention it at all, right? But it's the fact, because it's quite provable, like you said. So when they go to a client, if the client is searching a category and they're looking at various different providers, and they go, oh, well, they're MRC, it's like easy for you, isn't it? We'll just look on the MRC site. They're not on there.
Yeah, the MRC is a very easy site to look at. It's built on Front Page or from the mid 90s. It's an older website because they've been around for a long time, but it's a very simple website. You click on certifications or whatever the title is, and then it gives you a whole list of everybody that's either accredited or in progress of being accredited, because their accreditation process takes a while. Ours took, I think, about 6 months, the initial certification with TAG. It was a little faster, and we were moving fast because we knew it was important to have. Like, you want to give some people some proof of we're doing something more than just saying we're good. We have at least a certification that shows that we're following best practices.
Yeah.
But I'll give you something. I'll give you a dirty secret that's not in our 3-part series.
Okay.
Here we go. This is a world exclusive.
I haven't really told this story to too many, but we were just talking about with the sales team, affiliate fraud and stuff like that. And the story came up. So I said, this actually would be pretty good for you guys because it's not in our 3-part series. So I've seen fraud, all kinds of fraud that's been happening. So we had a client that came to us. They were using our competitor, weren't happy with them, signed up for us based on a podcast that I did. So that was interesting. And we started putting this stuff together. And the person who was head of fraud absolutely loved the product. We found $3 million plus a month in fraud. It was about a third of their overall traffic that they were spending on affiliate traffic.
Wow.
And then a couple months into it, they shut it off. So I was like, something doesn't make sense. Long story short, and I can't name names, but long story short, the CEO of the company was responsible for committing the fraud with his friends and some internal employees. Now, the reason they were doing that is they were trying to sell the company.
It's just more money, right? That's it.
They're boosting their rate through fraud, and they were hoping to use a technology like us because we were certified. That was one of the reasons why they chose us, to say, hey, look, this company's certified, and they blessed our traffic. Meanwhile, we didn't. We found all the fraud. So
See, he was like, "You're costing me $3 million, you absolute asshole."
they didn't want to spend the money with us.
Yeah, it's funny you mention that. We've seen similar sort of things, not in terms of someone in the company, but I have heard of that. But not into like in a completely different way, just for people like dumping leads in and stuff. And a lot of people accuse Facebook and Google of potentially allowing fraud to potentially enter because it's more lucrative for them, and they deny it completely. But do they really do everything they can to stop it?
Well, let's put it this way. When I got started on the internet from the best I remember and from what I can research was officially handed over to or went public so that the public can join it September 1st of 1991. I jumped on the internet bandwagon 2 years later, only because I was in the middle of going to school and I couldn't pay attention to all that stuff. But I got on as soon as I could. And I remember writing in fact, I even got written up for one of the first motion graphics on the internet when I built one of Web Mall. And I've done a lot of stuff in the space, but it was all just a bunch of techies, working on new stuff because it was just kind of something cool from the tech side of things to work on. And as you're building the company or the internet, it was supposed to be a place for just complete freedom of everything, like no government regulation, no big companies deciding what you can and can't do. So when you start looking at where some of the big companies are today, this is not what a lot of us in the beginning envisioned. So it's a little frustrating. However, with that being said, when it comes to Facebook and it comes to Google, I would personally say, based on what I see, that they generally do try to stop fraud. Now, granted, if 5 or 10% of their traffic is fraudulent, they're making money off of that, and that's typically what we find on campaigns from them is 5 to 10% of it is fraud. They are doing what they can. For example, on Facebook, we all know that there are fake profiles. And Facebook makes no bones about it. They talk about it. They're doing what they can to stop it. But the fraudsters are always one step ahead. They're doing what they can to keep those profiles alive so they can make money off of those indirectly.
Yeah.
Ever go to Fiverr and find you can buy 10,000 likes to your Facebook account for five or $10? That's how they do it, right? So they make money indirectly by having those fake profiles. I do believe that they're doing what they can, but there's still stuff that they're missing. Nobody's perfect.
But it's interesting as well. The only reason they can do what they can is because of the walled garden that they've created outside of the mainstream internet. Because otherwise, it'd be very difficult to stop, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Now, in conjunction to that, I am going to say that Google is not helping with the fraud detection world. They're making changes right now. This is a techie side of the deal, right? They own Chrome. Chrome owns about 65% of the marketplace. They're actually making changes to their browser in the interest of privacy, which actually protects bots. Now I'm sure they're not trying to do that. Well, I'm not sure. They're not probably doing that intentionally, but when you start and even look at Apple basically rolled out that iOS 14, right? We all saw that, and it's supposed to protect the privacy of their users, but they also protect bots on their network by doing
interesting
that
way
same
of putting
privacy.
Because there's nothing to track. Yeah.
No, they're trying to reduce the trackability of people for privacy concerns. But by doing that, you're making it easier for bots to go undetected or human fraud farms to go undetected. So they're really not helping. But again, they're trying to control the market. These companies, again, they're trying to take over internet marketing because it's a $500 billion a year business worldwide. They're trying to take over their marketplace. So really what's Apple's doing or Chrome's doing is they're blocking it from everybody else seeing it, but they know exactly what's going on. So think of it this way. If the world is a 65% Chrome, that means Google owns that user base in a way. And if they block off their stuff for privacy, but they know what's going on underneath the hood, they're really just blocking out their competitors from being able to track and market to them. So if cookies go away and all this trackability goes away so that you can't do retargeting unless, of course, you work with Google, because Google knows under Chrome, it just becomes a big business taking over the internet, which is not, again, what a lot of us who started early on the internet were looking to see.
I think this is something that a lot of people miss as well, is that a lot of this tracking stuff that you mentioned with Apple and with Google, most big changes that happen, whether it's on the internet or in the world, whatever, like people driven. You know, you have a outrage of people that go, we demand this to be changed. And a lot of people think this is the one time that technology is in front of the people, and they're doing it for the right moral reasons, because these people want to be able to protect their data and sort of, you know, be able to monetize themselves rather than Google or Apple or whoever monetize them. But it's interesting, the point that you make is that although that is the potential outcome that happens, they're not actually doing it for that reason. They're just doing it because they can make more money from you as an individual within the stake that they have of you on the internet.
Yep. And by doing that, because they're not working, they're not playing well in the sandbox, right? So by doing that, the problem is it becomes a lot more difficult for fraud detection. So all these fraud detection companies that are popping up left and right, because they're using less than ideal standards to identify fraud, to becoming less and less effective. You know, where a company like us really has to stay on our toes to be able to track this stuff at a level that we're tracking.
Yeah.
I think when it comes to something like fraud, it's nice to attempt to kind of quantify it if possible. I think people do like numbers. And to give you an example, when we talk about fraud on, you know, in the lead gen space, the number we use like is 35% of leads we see that have been through the system in some way fraudulent or out of spec, or, you know, various things. With, you know, from your side of it, if possible, can you put a number on the sort of the fraud you see, and on from that, sort of what are the worst channels, what's the highest kind of fraud in certain channels?
Sure. So generally speaking, and this is based on new clients that we see coming on board, on average, we catch 25% of their traffic is fraudulent. Now, when we start breaking down channels, so if I have somebody who's doing 100% affiliate, right, I can tell you that the average affiliate traffic fraud that we catch is about 45%, which is equal to one of the biggest marketing channels out there, programmatic. Most people don't realize how bad programmatic traffic is, but about 45% of that of traffic is, so it's just as bad as affiliates. Let's see, if you look at like Google, Facebook, you'll see 5 to 10% fraud. If you look at like, you know, native companies like Taboola or Outbrain, you'll be somewhere around 15% fraud. Let's see who else we got out there channel wise. Email marketing is all over the place, but on average, probably 20 to 30% fraud. It's really all over the place.
It depends how the data is gathered in the first place, doesn't it? I guess that's the thing with email. Yeah.
It's all how they get the email addresses into your system. So we talk about programmatic, affiliate. Who am I missing?
I think that's pretty much it, because it's
those are the basic channels, and that's why I say, I mean, I've gotten companies that come on board, we find 97% fraud. I got companies that come on board, we find 2% fraud. Like, it all depends on how they're doing their marketing and what they do to optimize their marketing channels. But on average, across the board, you can say $1 in $4 spent on marketing is lost to fraud.
Yeah, it's incredible, isn't it? I mean, our exposure is kind of similar to yours in the sense, apart from, I guess the email we track as well. So we're less about like the ad fraud. So we, for example, just call like an API that would be like your solution or someone else's solution or whatever to catch the metadata fraud. We're more about like, you know, the actual data, the first party data that's being captured, and then the verification of that. But what's interesting is that, and it's something we talk about a lot with clients, because they'll be like, oh, you know, we want to stop salacious names, and I'm like, that isn't the problem. Fraudsters don't use salacious names. You know, they want real people. They want real like numbers. They want real email addresses. They want you to think this is 100% a real person, and they'll do everything they can to like possible to make you believe that. And that can be like a misconception that people have about fraud. I think that it can be easily found in the data that's submitted as if of the individual, when in reality it's the background noise that created that data that's where the fraud exists, isn't it?
Right. It's a crazy space, and that's a problem. A good fraudster is going to hide behind all kinds of stuff, anything that they can put up to try to do. I'll give you here's a great example. I had a client that came on board, was dealing with affiliate-based traffic, identified one of their top affiliates as 40% fraud. So he calls me up, he says, okay, I've got a problem, shows me the situation, we go through, look at the data, said, oh yeah, this is 40% fraud. He goes, how sure are you? I'm like, I'm 100% certain. We only mark traffic as fraud when we're 100% certain that it's fraud. And he goes, I have a call with them today, and he was my college roommate. So is my college roommate trying to screw me? And I'm like, I always believe the good in people. I believe he's not screwing you on purpose, right? He's getting screwed by his sub-affiliates that are hiding behind all kinds. And it could be not just a sub-affiliate, it could be a sub-affiliate of a sub-affiliate. You don't know how far down the chain it goes. So essentially what we did was we had isolated data, found the information, and I gave it to him. He went and called his friend up, had a long talk, and they quickly identified a single affiliate. It wasn't a sub-affiliate. It was one of his direct affiliates that was causing the problem. We eliminated that. All of a sudden, the ROI went up. Everybody was happy. The fraud rate went down, and he didn't lose a friend over it. So, like I said, it's they will hide in any way they can, but they usually try to fly below the radar. They don't want to be in your top 10 affiliates. They don't want to be, they'll create multiple accounts and do it, siphon money from your account little by little. And it's always something so difficult to find unless you have a tool to help identify where the fraud is.
I mean, I suppose we've identified it in a couple of ways where this, and you don't always see this, there can be patterns in the data. So like something really simple, it can be like the format that, like in the UK, for example, a postcode is written in. So, like we've seen data where it's written in the same way on like 200 records in a row. And you're like, the sort of statistical chances of this happening are virtually nil.
Yeah.
There's something that's submitting this data in this way, or you'll see it with, I think this happens with click farms in other countries where they're not entirely sure of the gender of the data they've got. And they'll start putting titles that don't relate to the gender of the name. So it'll be like Mrs. John Smith, and you'll see a pattern emerge like that. And you're like, hold on. We've seen 100 records in a row, and 30% of them have got the wrong title attached to the typical name of a male or female to that name. And I think you can sometimes catch it, but not always, because if they're using like a phone book, for example, and just submitting the data, or they bought a load of list data and they're submitting it has the title, it can be really hard to track, catch it in the first party data at that point.
Very interesting. Yeah. And there's a lot of craziness out there. So yeah, it's just, I look at it all day, and sometimes I got to put my hats off to some of the fraud that I find, because they're very creative in doing what they do. Like what you're talking about, is less sophisticated attack, because it becomes more obvious. Like when you're sitting on the other end, it looks obvious, but the attacks that we're really focusing, like we catch that, but what we're focusing on is the more advanced attacks, where they'll go, let's say, for example, they'll use human fraud farms, like human click farms, right? So that typing out the information, let's say in a lead form, for example, looks legitimately typed out by a human. So if they put any bot checks in front of them, they pass the test because they're not bots. Then they'll use aged leads. So at one point, somebody put their information into the system for an offer. Maybe it was 90 days old, 120 days old, whatever. They'll take that information and recycle it into a form. So they'll pay pennies on the dollar for the aged leads, recycle it into a form. The data is going to check and pass. And if they get enough data, you're never going to be able to identify that, because these people actually filled it out. In fact, when the call center picks up and calls these people and says, hey, you filled out a form to save money on your car insurance, most of the time the person's like, yeah. And then you'll do your pitch. They're not going to turn around and say, well, I filled it out months ago. Most people won't say that.
No.
So I always instruct my customers, always say, okay, by the way, did you fill out the form today? Or whatever the form was filled out. And that's when you'll find out, no, I filled that form out like months ago. Now you know it's a fraudulent lead, or it was entered in fraudulently.
I suppose the good thing with like sales qualified leads is it becomes pretty apparent fairly quickly, because even if your normal conversion rate is 20% and you suddenly have 50 leads and it's dropped to 1%, it's like, even if you are contacting them. The real problem I see is like in MQLs, marketing qualified leads that a lot of affiliate networks will run. So they'll run like signups to, I don't know, a newsletter about some new beauty products or something, and the client will be paying like $2-3 per lead coming in, and all it is an email address being entered, and they just get absolutely rinsed and their pants pulled down, because there's no like, there's nothing to like quantify it again. It's not like you're speaking to them on the phone. You can look at open rates and click rates, but the reality is when you start dealing with bigger companies and all they're trying to do is spend $50,000 to fill a CRM that they've been given the task to do, a lot of the time they're not even sending like the email straight away. Like they're just filling a database of money that they've spent, and then they're going to spend the next 6 months seeing what like money can be generated from it. And the amount of fraud, that we see on stuff like that is just huge. And it's every single campaign that runs, every single campaign on like a big affiliate network that runs of anything like that. The amount of fraud, it's just almost mind-boggling when you just sit there and you're like, the numbers involved here are just ridiculous, and they just can't stop it. It just seems incredible to me.
It's funny because I'll talk to companies and go through the same situation where email marketing. That's why I said on average, email marketing is like between 20 and 30%. It's higher than you would expect, but like I said, like you're in the space where you're looking at, you get it. So what we'll do is we'll set up with companies and we'll walk through it and find out, we'll benchmark originally their fraud rate, and we'll get a sampling rate just to see how much fraud they're dealing with. Because I always tell people this year fraud should exceed $100 billion in stolen funds from advertisers. So it's not a question of if you have fraud, it's a question of how much fraud you have. So a lot of times we'll do a quick analysis of you just get a baseline of where they are right now, find out exactly how much fraud they have, and then come up with a game plan to resolve it. So if it's an email list, we'll help them sanitize the list by checking, the response rates and click rate. Because what's happening is they'll fill out these bogus email addresses, and then to perpetrate that, they'll throw those into a bot, and the bot will answer the email. We'll click on something, we'll go to the landing page, we'll actually do stuff to make it look real to keep that email address alive long enough to get paid. So what we'll do is we'll help them identify that, and then be able to isolate which email addresses are generating fake traffic versus the ones that generating real traffic, so that they can start whittling down their thing. But the problem is half these people, because in the affiliate world, the goal is to pay affiliates as fast as possible. Affiliates love 1 day turnaround, 7 day turnaround, net 14, something like that. If you go beyond 2 weeks and paying an affiliate, you're gonna have a hard time attracting good affiliates. But at the same token, you don't have enough time to validate what they're selling you, what you're paying for is real.
I think there's another problem, which is if you're going to an affiliate network, so let's say, I don't know, you're Ford and you've got a brochure request campaign, or even it could be a test drive, because they're not persistently buying leads, they're running like campaigns. So, like 1 month where they'll have like a $50,000 budget, and they're going to spend that in that month, and they won't buy leads again for the next year, for the next 11 months. And so their exposure to it isn't like a company that persistently buys leads. I draw a very strong distinction between those two types of companies, because one is like, that is their entire tactic to grow and keep their company going, and the other is just like, it's like changing a TV ad, like it changes constantly. And I think they're the ones that get the most stung, because it's not something they're persistently doing. So they just see it as like this one-off, and then they might not even invest in anything additional, because it's like, that budget is spent, and the next 11 months are just going to be doing something else. So I always think they're the ones that get like the most screwed over, without a question of a doubt.
Interesting. Yeah, there are different buying styles of companies, and either way, that, like I said, the fraud still needs to be identified. But like you said, the first example where a company is buying traffic all at once and then utilizing that for the next 11 months, they still have to pay those affiliates, or however they're getting the traffic, in month 1. And by the time they realize it's bad data or fraudulent leads altogether, whatever it is that they're buying, it's usually they've already paid out their affiliate or their source of traffic. And at that point, it's too late. It's like you can't claw back. So there's typically what you'll see a lot of affiliates. I'll give you another example. We had a client right before the pandemic was booking 30,000 airline tickets a day through their e-commerce platform. They paid their affiliates out every 2 weeks, but could take upwards of 9 months to identify the fraudulent transactions. So there's a long period of time in there where an affiliate can just defraud the system for months on end, and then create other sub accounts, same affiliate, just create other new accounts. So once they eventually get caught and they try to claw back, they're only losing maximum 2 weeks of pay. So they already have 2 or 3 or 4 others set up. They're already thinking 3 or 4 steps ahead. So they're constantly getting paid while the company is running around trying to figure this out. And that was a big problem for them, because we even had a situation where we identified, a transaction as fraud, and the head of fraud calls up and says, I think you're wrong on this transaction, because the individual actually flew the ticket. And I looked at the data and I said, nah, looking at the back end data, this is definitely entered by somebody who wasn't in the country, who doesn't live where you think they are. Like, this is definitely fraud. There's no question in my mind, it's fraudulent. And sure enough, 3 months later, it came back and I got charged back. So they were so brazen enough to jump on a flight with fake ID or something to be able to fly that ticket.
Wow.
I feel like we've definitely done what we set out to do. We've uncovered lots of dirty secrets from you there, Rich, which is fantastic. Also maybe created some panic for the people listening. So I want to bring this back around and talk about the prevention side of it, and on a relatively positive note. But I kind of want to do it from the perspective of something you said earlier on, which I found interesting. And we speak to people a lot, and there's this idea that they may be set up for prevention, and they kind of think, right, that's done now. My fraud's being sort of taken care of, and they kind of leave that. But like what you said earlier is that fraudsters are constantly getting smarter, constantly evolving, coming with new ways. So I think it's worth just almost reinforcing the fact that this is an ongoing process. It's not just like a setup in the league you're running. It's like a constant battle to come up with ways to find and detect new fraud. And I thought that'd be quite a nice way to sort of segue into what you guys do at Anura as well.
Sure. So, when you're talking about detection methods, we were on the advertising side, since 2005 or 2003. And we were developing our own system to, we were out there marketing for all kinds of different products and services for lead gen, heavily on the lead gen side. We did a few e-commerce campaigns, but mostly on the lead gen side. And we started realizing that you started identifying some weird patterns in the data, and things just, they just didn't make sense. A gut check said there was something wrong here. So we started looking further and found what we found to be fraud. So we started building our own system to identify the fraud, and it worked great. And then it didn't. As soon as we identified how fraud is, a month later, 2 months later, all of a sudden, I guess they caught on to what we were doing and then be able to circumvent that. And so we made another version, and then we made another version, and it became this cat and mouse game of constantly trying to stay, 1 or 2 steps ahead of them as best we could. And we developed something that and a system and a process that works really, really well. And it took us about 10 years to really hone down and get this technology to the point where it was very, very accurate. In fact, we're the only solution in the market to achieve a greater than 99.999% accuracy rating when identifying fraud. Typically, one of the dirty secrets in our ebooks here talk about how the average fraud solution walking around has 10% false positives. So that's losing big money. So essentially what we did was, after 10 years, we're sitting here doing this, all of a sudden we looked up and realized, wow, there's a market for this. So essentially at the beginning of the day, when we first realized there was fraud, I'm like, I've been dealing with fraud for the last decade. I understand there's got to be a solution out in the marketplace. Let me just buy it, bolt it onto what we're doing, and call it a day. I want to be a client of ours, right? We did the research, and actually there was no fraud solutions out in the marketplace that you could buy. There was just nothing existed. I looked high and low because I knew the undertaking of putting one together. That's what started the process of saying, okay, we have no choice, put it together. Then 10 years later, I looked up and realized, oh shoot, there's a market for this. So, everybody's calling out a woodwork, building these solutions. Let's test ours against what's in the marketplace and see if it's worth bringing this one to market. We tested up, we did a year-long study, and I spent, I don't know, $100,000 of my own money just testing budgets so we can actually buy traffic from different networks, run it through 4 or 5 different filters and see which one worked the best. We realized we had an advantage over our competitors, and we decided, let's launch this as a new program. Took us, from that point, took us about a year to put the whole thing together, slap on a really, really slick user interface, and then we launched in 2017. And we've gone head to head with, I don't know, dozens of different fraud solutions in the marketplace. And when it comes tech for tech, we have yet to lose a test, proving accuracy and thoroughness of the solution. People, it doesn't mean we win every contract. Obviously, it's just like everything else. People maybe have a better experience with a salesperson over there. Maybe they know somebody at the other company. Maybe there's a feature that another company has that we don't have. There's other reasons why, we don't win every contract, but like I said, we're out there in the market helping to fight the good fight and doing it the right way.
Yeah, it's kind of a similar story to us, I think, in some ways. I just want to tell you something that happened to us because it reminded me when you said you built something and it stopped working. We started doing double opt-in verification of like affiliate leads coming in, and when we very first did it, it started working really well, right? So email affiliate sign up, we'd send them an email going, click this button to confirm your entry or whatever it was, and they click it, and only at that point would we post the lead out. And what we suddenly, one day we were sat there and like, this is working great, volumes have gone down like 40%, so we're getting rid of the fraud and whatever else. And one day a lead fired with this like double opt-in as if it had done it, but it was a lead that wasn't even involved in a double opt-in campaign, right? So we went into it, we were like, how the fuck has this happened? And what we realized is that when you could, in the back end of the form, figure out where the lead was forwarding to. And what we were using was the lead ID, that if you like got some curl around the back and grabbed it when you submitted the lead, we were using that as a part of the link to submit the double opt-in, because it just acts like a lead update API back to that lead to then verify, like true one, bang, send out. And so what happened is the fraudster or fraudsters, whoever, must have put the wrong digit in on the lead ID that was meant to fire. And I don't know how long they were doing this for. And so it fired the wrong lead. And it was only at that point we went, holy shit, they've figured out they've created a bot that's actually, they've got a human doing the submission of the data, a bot grabbing the lead ID of the forwarding, and then a bot going to the email it received or a person and clicking it and replacing the lead ID in the part of the URL it was in. And yep. I was like, that's pretty, because you've got to have like quite a few different steps running to be able to do this. But then we realized, shit, like these fraudsters can figure any of this sort of shit out. We need to be able to change this so that they can't do the double. So that, that's like a classic way of people catching fraud or whatever, is doing double opt-in. But bots, people, they will get around it if you don't put something in place to stop. And even then they probably will, so you then have to do something else, but it just reminded me when you said you've got something working and it suddenly stopped.
And that's what you got to realize. Don't underestimate the fraudster. Yeah. They're very intelligent, and they're going after $100 billion pie. There's a lot of it. And again, there's right now, at least in the United States, there's no law against it. So internationally, if you're committing fraud internationally, we came across this. Interpol has a minimum of $800,000 in stolen funds in order to get involved. We tried it. We had somebody committing fraud against our company at one point, and we pinpointed who they were, and we wanted to go after them. And Interpol stepped in and said, unless you can prove 800,000 stolen, we can't get involved, because we have to have minimum thresholds. Otherwise, we don't have the resources to go after everybody under that. So they know the laws, and there's very few that affect them, because there's nothing on the books that says this is what when you're committing ad fraud, or this, whatever, however you want to define it, this is the law that you're breaking. So a lot of times when they catch people committing fraud at high enough levels, they'll catch them for, wire fraud, tax evasion. They'll catch them for something else, but there's no law in the book. So you got no laws against it. $100 billion a year payout to to anybody committing fraud. There's a big incentive to do it and hire the best and brightest to try to get around any system out there where they can make money. And like I say, if you make it difficult enough, they'll just go on to somebody else. Just like it's like a thief in the night, right? They walk up to the door of a house, they see a dog, they see it protected by some alarm company. They just go to the next guy's house.
Yeah,
they just find another. It's easy enough. I mean, why make your job difficult?
Yeah, I agree.
That's a very good analogy. And also, I just want to repeat one thing you said there, because this could have been a title in its own for a different podcast in it later on. Don't underestimate the fraudster. I'm gonna pinch that as well and use that.
I thought you were going to say thief in the night.
Yeah, I feel like in the context of that, I might think I'm writing a book or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's two great titles. And Rich, you've been an absolute pleasure to have you back on the show and to be able to speak to you for a little bit longer this time than we managed in London. And that was episode 75, The Dirty Secrets of Ad Fraud. Thanks for listening to the B2C Lead Generation podcast. Be sure to hit subscribe to hear more from those at the very cutting edge of the lead gen world.